Chapter 66. Frank. Despite the midday heat and the raging storm of death energy, a group of tourists was climbing over the ruins. Fortunately, there weren't many, and they didn't give the demigods a second look. After the crowds in Rome, Frank had stopped worrying too much about getting noticed. If they could fly their warship into Roman Colosseum and battle ballistae with blazing fire and not even cause a traffic slowdown, he figured they can get away with anything. Nico led the way. At the top of the hill, he climbed over an old retaining wall and down into an excavated trench. Finally, they arrived at a stone doorway leading straight into the side of a hill. The death storm seemed to originate right above their heads. Looking up at the swirling tentacles of darkness, Frank felt he was trapped at the bottom of a flushing toilet bowl. That really did not calm his nerves. Nico faced the group. "From here, it gets rough."
"Sweet," Leo said. So far, I've been totally pulling my punches."
Nico glared at him.
"We'll see how long you keep your sense of humor. Remember, this is where the pilgrims came to commune with the dead ancestors. On the ground, you may see things that are hard to look at, or hear voices that try to lead you astray in the tunnels. Frank, do you have the barley cakes?"
"What?" Frank had been thinking about his grandmother and his mom, wondering if they might appear to him. For the first time in days, the voices of Ares and Mars had started to argue again in the back of Frank's mind, debating their favorite forms of violent death. "I've got the cakes," Hazel said. She pulled out the magical barley cakes that they'd made from the grain Tripolimus had given them in Venice.
"Eat up,"
Nico advised. Frank chewed his cracker of death and tried not to gag. It reminded him of a cookie made with sawdust instead of sugar.
"Yum,"
Piper said. Even the daughter of Aphrodite couldn't avoid making a face.
"Okay."
Nico choked down the last of his barley.
"That should protect us from the poison."
"Poison?" Leo asked. "Did I miss poison? 'Cause I love poison."
"Soon enough," Nico promised. "Just stick close together, and maybe we can avoid getting lost or going insane."
On that happy note, Nico led them underground. The tunnel spiraled gently downward, the ceiling supported by white stone arches that reminded Frank of a whale's ribcage. As they walked, Hazel ran her hands along the masonry.
"This wasn't part of the temple," she whispered. "This was the basement of a manor house built in later Greek times."
Frank found it eerie how Hazel could tell so much about an underground place just by being there. He'd never known her to be mistaken.
"A manor house?" he asked. "Please don't tell me we're in the wrong place." "The house of Hades is below us," Nico assured him. "But Hazel's right. These upper levels are much newer. When the archaeologists first excavated the site, they thought they'd found the Necromantum Tanion. They then realized that the ruins are too recent, so they decided it was the wrong spot. They were right the first time. They just didn't dig deep enough."
They turned a corner and stopped. In front of them, the tunnel ended in a huge block of stone. "A cave-in?" Jason asked.
"A test," Nico said. "Hazel, would you do the honors?"
Hazel stepped forward. She placed her hand on the rock, and the entire boulder crumbled to dust. The tunnel shuddered. Cracks spread across the ceiling. For a terrifying moment, Frank imagined they'd all be crushed under tons of earth. A disappointing way to die after all that they'd been through. Then the rumbling stopped, and the dust settled. A set of stairs curved deeper into the earth, the barreled ceiling held up by more repeating arches, closer together and carved from polished black stone. The descending arches made Frank feel dizzy, as if he were looking into an endlessly reflecting mirror. Painted on the walls were crude pictures of black cattle marching downward.
"I really don't like cows," Piper muttered.
"Agreed," Frank said.
"Those are the cattle of Hades," Nico said. "It's just a symbol of—"
"Look," Frank pointed. On the first step of the stairwell, a golden chalice gleamed. Frank was pretty sure it hadn't been there a moment before. The cup was full of a dark green liquid.
"Hooray!" Leo said half-heartedly. "I suppose that's our poison."
Nico picked up the chalice.
"We're standing in the ancient entrance to the Necromantum. Odysseus came here, and dozens of other heroes, seeking advice from the dead."
"Did the dead advise them to leave immediately?" Leo asked.
"I'd be fine with that," Piper admitted.
Nico drank from the chalice, and then offered it to Jason.
"You asked me about trust in taking a risk? Well, here you go, son of Jupiter. Let's see how much you trust me."
Frank wasn't sure what Nico was talking about, but Jason did not hesitate. He immediately took the cup and drank.